Is the Pope Catholic? Yes. And now so is Candace Owens. Why is everyone turning to Christianity? And is it true that Christianity is responsible for more wars and death than any other faith and militarism and globalism put together? Hello there, you awakening wonders. Thanks for joining us on this voyage to truth and freedom. Click the link in the description. You get an additional exclusive video every week. It's really good. You join us when we do interviews. We meditate together every week. We've got a book club at the moment. We're doing Mere Christianity. Plus, after some of the shows, the main live stream shows, you know about that, we stay, we have a chat, we get to know each other. Look at you, you're skin and bone. We get to know each other like a family in this ever-changing, topsy-turvy, crazy old world we're living in, because now people are converting to Christianity and to other religious faiths in a way that would have been inconceivable 20, 30 years ago. In fact, people always used to say, what do we do to make Christianity more relevant? Either Christianity feels liturgical and antiquated and inaccessible and therefore irrelevant, one could argue, or they try to modernize it and it seems with, hello there, Jesus is your buddy. And you think, oh, I'm not into that at all.
Hey, Scotty. Jesus, man.
But this video takes as its starting point the recent conversion to Catholicism of Candace Owens. Candace Owens left the Daily Wire, and it's widely understood that it's as a result of reporting on Middle Eastern conflict, which is itself regarded as a religious conflict, even though many might say it's territorial and is in fact the legacy not only of the Old Testament, but as much the legacy of the British Empire and the way that that region has been carved out. And Jesus, I'm not trying to solve that conversation in this video. It's enough for me to put forward my ideas on the nature of Christianity, not the true essential nature of Christianity, simply my perspective on it, and why we might be seeing a resurgence of interest in Christianity. Indeed, I myself, I'm getting baptized at the weekend. I don't know, I don't know at which point I'm getting baptized at the weekend there.
Len, I'm not coming to your Baptist church. You always get people when they're down.
So I'm pretty interested in Christianity. There, I've told you. I wasn't going to tell you, I've told you. So let's look at Candace's conversion. We'll talk a bit about my experiences with Christianity, and we'll look at Christianity's legacy when it comes to imperialism, colonialism, and violence, and why young people might be interested in Christianity when the world is falling apart, nothing's got any meaning, and all of the offerings that the culture gave us, the hedonic, pleasurable offerings of you'll be famous and you'll be able to sleep around and it'll be great fun, when it all just falls apart and dissipates into chaos and ugliness and lies and deception, and when materialism doesn't work anymore, why might people find an ever-loving, present God appealing in this nihilistic, barren, empty, horrific world where even nature, even by its advocates, is seen simply as a resource rather than a sacred part of who all of us truly are? Let's get into it. Candace Owens has converted to Catholicism, describing it as a decision to go home. The pundit posted 2 photos of her at the church holding a candle and posing with Father Julian Large, who serves as provost of the oratory. Large is described as one of the best-known preachers in England by a Christian aid group. I didn't know they was in England, that's cool. By a Christian aid group, Nazarene. Owens said she would reveal more about her conversion at a later date. Here is the post from Candace Owens. I didn't know that it was in England. Recently, I made the decision to go home. To England? No, to Jesus. There is, of course, so much more that went into the decision, and that I plan to share in the future. But for now, praise be to God for his gentle but relentless guiding of my heart towards truth. And then she's got a scriptural quote. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. I do not fear, Christ is King. Christ is King has sort of become Candace Owens' catchphrase extraordinarily. But God, isn't that verse so beautiful? In a sense, I think we can, in a way, hang the entire argument just around this piece of scripture. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Do you sometimes feel incredible despair and loneliness and hopelessness and think, oh no, I don't know what's going to make me feel any better than this? My options are either things just radically change through chance and happenstance and coincidence and stuff. I'm crossing my fingers pretty hard, man. Or maybe, love or some external thing. But after a while, certainly when, God, if you're my age, you realise, or you've been shown, I've been shown, no material thing is going to work for you ever. It doesn't matter if you become successful. It doesn't matter if you become famous. In fact, those things might invert and metastasize into absolute horrors before your very eyes. That's certainly what I've experienced. It doesn't even matter if you have a family, even though, of course, there are great values and incredible beauty to be had in the life of a family. In the end, the material world, as I was once told by a Hindu monk after receiving a meditation, because I'm coming via the New Age route, of course, you'll understand, said to me, the material world has got nothing else to give you, Russell. It can only take take from you. I didn't like being told that. It upset me a great deal, but it has proven to be true. While this world is falling apart around us, while we're seeing the rise of deception and of lies, the centralization of powers, the inability to tell the truth, the increasing of authoritarianism, isn't it clear that people might start looking for something extraneous to that modality when it comes to a solution? Now, in a minute, we'll be talking about a David Icke post where he criticizes me, among others, for our conversions or our affections and devotion towards Christianity. And I'm very sympathetic towards David Icke. In fact, cards on the table, I like David Icke a lot. And I feel that I understand where he's coming from, because you could regard Christianity as just another institution and system of power. But I'm going to explain to you in a minute why I don't see it that way. Let's get into this with a few news articles about, first of all, the rise of interest in spirituality and the reasons for it. A greater share of young adults say they believe in a higher power or God. About 1/3 of 18 to 25-year-olds say they believe, more than doubt, the existence of a higher power, up from about 1/4 in 2021, according to a recent survey of young adults. What a fascinating statistic. Of course, higher power is a very loose term, and it could be seen, as Jordan Peterson would say, a higher principle. And even secularists and atheists would say there are moral values, and sort of eloquent atheists would say, I don't require a supernatural deity in order to have a moral code. But it is difficult to see where the moral code is derived from. It's just a sort of a choice in chaos, a deliberate choice to say, I value this species over that species, or I value this decision over that decision, because if there is no meaning, purpose, or God, and all there is material phenomena and consciousness evolved out of material phenomena, then you may as well say, I've seen Ricky Gervais's great joke on this, you may as well say, let's just kill people indiscriminately and willy-nilly for the hell of it, as say, live a moral and loving life. I'm not saying that wouldn't it be fun to murder people. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there is no value judgment to be made between the two. And the minute you sense that being kind and loving and gracious is somehow different qualitatively to being selfish and cruel, you're saying something quite profound. You're saying there is a value in it. That's how Clive Lewis, or C.S. Lewis, handles this argument. We all know, don't we, that there's a difference between good and bad. We can't bring you this earth-shattering, paradigm-changing content without the support of our partners and without clear heads. That's why I'm happy to tell you that AirsTech are the only published, peer-reviewed, patented EMF protection solution. That means electromagnetic field, you know that. Trusted by experts, neuroscientists, doctors, biohackers, and pro-fighting athlete cage fighters. Its effectiveness has been proven in real time using EEG brain scan demonstrations. Remove the fear and unknown levels of daily exposure and have peace of mind with AirsTech LifeTune protection. Over 20 years invested in research and development, AirsTech technology creates synergy between you and your devices by modulating and transforming chaotic frequencies to match our own biological energy. Unlock better wellness. Go to airstech.com and use the code Russell30 for 30% off your entire purchase. Have one of these in your area. And remember, if you're an awakened wonder, you can see in our 5G video exactly why this stuff is so important. So take advantage of this offer. Click the link in the description. Let's get back to the content, baby. Young adults and theologians and church leaders attribute the increase in part to the need for people to believe in something beyond themselves after 3 years of loss. For many young people, the pandemic was the first crisis they faced. It affected everyone to some degree, from the loss of family and friends to uncertainty about jobs and daily life. In many ways, it aged young Americans, and they are now turning to the same comfort previous generations have turned to during tragedies for healing and comfort. Of course, that's a rational analysis. But also during the pandemic, I would argue, indeed we have been arguing for 3 or 4 years now, that we learned that there are a convergence of powerful interests. You don't need to be able to corroborate a conspiracy, nor even declare one, to say that it appears that because there was a wealth transfer, because it was beneficial to centralized systems of power, whether they were state or globalist, because huge businesses and globalist corporate interests doubtlessly benefited, because lots of laws were passed that enabled people to regulate and that enabled governments to surveil, that we saw what the nature of our current moral, ethical and value systems was. It's actually rather exploitative, this, and disingenuous, many people thought, because at the beginning of the pandemic we were told, well, we've all got to get locked in our houses and take this medicine. The value that was used to illicit compliance was all life is sacred, but we did not see life being treated as sacred during the pandemic period, and people were exposed to profound truth. Hold on a minute, they're telling us life is sacred, but they're treating us as if life is disposable. What does that mean? means you can't trust them, for one thing. 84% of the world's population identifies with a religious group. Members of this demographic are generally younger and produce more children than those who have no religious affiliation. So the world is getting more religious, not less. That would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. Secularism, materialism, post-Enlightenment values were on the rise, but it led to individualism, selfishness, a kind of worship of the self. These are not my arguments. These are arguments that you might see in a film like Century of the Self by Adam Curtis. These are arguments that are available in psychotherapy, but perhaps what we can offer you here is personal experience as well as a degree of clarity that if you don't have an explicit God and a set of values that you attribute to that God, it's likely that the default summit of your life will be self-betterment, self-aggrandizement, fulfillment of self. If you take a moment, and this is particularly relevant if you don't believe in God, what is your God really? Is your God what you want and what you fear? Because your life is not purposeless. You're not like this. I don't care what happens. I might do nothing. I might do this. You're not randomly choosing things. There is a system of values that is guiding you. And the default, and I think this is very useful and beneficial for power, is to serve and protect the self. It's really difficult, but I'm speaking for myself, to wrench yourself away from self-fulfillment, to not think, I would like pleasure. I want to avoid fear. I want to be admired, prestige, power, many, many P's, sadly. This becomes the default value system. Now, what you require in order to overcome that is something more powerful than that. Where will you find something more powerful than the fulfillment of yourself? It could be a family for some people. It could be a job for some people. It could be a project. It could be cars. It could be almost anything. But in the end, unless it has some essential value, it will show itself to be a false idol. David Icke, though, who, as I said to you before, I like David Icke because I think David Icke introduced some fascinating concepts to broader awareness. I think that what he says, actually, when he says that there are interdimensional beings that are controlling reality, actually has pretty clear corollaries in literal scripture. I think I've heard Bishop Barron say that fallen angels are among us and Luciferian forces are controlling the world. And many people now talk about demonic possession in a way that they weren't, I swear, 10, 20 years ago. And what David Icke believes, perhaps most notably, is that interdimensional beings are controlling our reality. He believes this steadfastly. He is not willing to compromise on that. This is not a metaphor. That's what he believes. Well, in spiritual life, you also believe that we are engaged in a battle between good and evil, and there are forces of darkness that are manipulating our emotions and our desires and our nature for evil ends. So actually, they're saying the same thing. Let's have a look at David Icke's post in which he criticizes many high-profile conversions to Christianity, and I'm in this. Candace Owens converts to Roman Catholicism, as has Eva Vladingerbrook and Jordan Peterson's wife, while Russell Brand does the rosary. What is happening to the MAM? I think David means mainstream alternative media. They talk about freedom of speech and convert to a church with a long, long history of mass murder for the crime of having a different opinion. Extraordinary. Something's going on and it's not good. I feel that what David Icke is saying is interesting, but I feel that the people that I've spoken to within the church are well aware of the church's history, and I believe that what we're talking about there is not a set of spiritual values, but the utility that tends to exist when you have an exploitable institution. Some people kill in the name of secularism, some people kill in the name of nation, some people kill in the name of Christianity, some people kill in the name of Islam, some people kill because of my sort of age and background and education. When I heard that in Burma, people were killing in the name of Buddhism, I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. Buddhism's all about peace. But so's Christianity, so's Islam. All of them explicitly say you definitely shouldn't kill anyone. Like every single religion says, you know, we're all the same. There's some unity among us. Obviously, how could I not be being reductive? But find common ground. We're all one fraternity, brotherhood, sisterhood. We should be finding ways to love one another. And yet people have, for as long as there have been religions, found ways to tribalize and mobilize those ideas to make them territorial. Therefore, I think the minute they become territorial, they are no longer in accordance with the highest spiritual principles. I'm not suggesting that the Crusades didn't happen. I'm not suggesting that crime and violence isn't committed in the name of Islam or Judaism or Christianity. Plainly it is. It's an impossible argument. But that doesn't mean that those ideologies are fundamentally flawed. I know there's lots of people with strong arguments that are literally opposite that. I'm aware of Sam Harris. I've had that argument with Sam Harris. I'm aware of Ricky Gervais. I've had that argument with Ricky Gervais. I'm aware of Brian Cox. I've had this argument with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I've had it with a lot of the people that you're sort of probably would mentally reach for. So Richard Dawkins, I've had that argument argument with him. And what I feel is that the figure of Christ and Christianity itself is about overcoming your tendency towards selfishness and recognizing that you are saved and that you belong to God and that your life's purpose is not about self-fulfillment, it is about service. And that is an incredible challenge, and it's certainly not one that I'm claiming to be doing very well at, but it's certainly that is now my aspiration and that is now my direction. And when I make mistakes, as I inevitably do, and thankfully forgiveness is part of this path, I remember, oh yeah, you're supposed to be going that way. Whereas before, when Christianity wasn't in the picture, I was just like, well, aren't I supposed to just be like getting stuff? Isn't that the religion, the default religion of our time? Isn't that what you're being offered? Whether it's the American dream or your human rights or whatever you're being packaged, you're sort of being told. Like if you watch any commercial break now, you'll just see people tipping things into their mouths or gambling or getting stuff. It's hardly avant-garde to say that commercialism and consumerism are the default religions of our time, and that's why all of the religious festivals are converted into festivals of consumerism. I know that's not an original idea. I'm very well aware of that, but it is still a significant idea, and it's obviously important to note it's not working anymore. For a while, there was probably kind of a material ascendancy and availability of resources that meant a tipping point was not reached. Enough people were getting enough iPads, and enough people were getting enough fellatio, and enough people were getting enough fast cars, or whatever it is, or there was growth across new continents in the same way that the missionaries of Christianity would spread to different territories, the missionaries of consumerism were spreading to new territories. What we're clearly at now, and I believe that the pandemic period was a significant one, is a realization of, oh my God, it actually doesn't work. It actually doesn't work. You can't tell people anymore, go to university or go to college and then you'll come out and you'll get a job, because people are not as rich as their parents and people are not as happy as their parents, and it's not working anymore. And people are starting to recognize that what the future might look a lot like is, we need you to participate in this war. We need you to stay in your house. We need you to put this chip under your skin. People have started to sense that that's what's coming, and it's difficult to argue with it. And that's why I remain incredibly amenable and open to David Icke and David Icke's opinions, even though I disagree strongly with his analysis here. And I would love the opportunity to speak openly with David Icke about that. Anyway, he continues, hurl all the abuse you like. It matters not to me. It needs saying when blatant cognitive dissonance is so rampant. So I hope that I've addressed much of what David Icke has said there, and let me know what you think in the comments and chat about that. So let's address from a legacy media perspective, because this is out of a British legacy media propagandist tool, the idea that religion is responsible for conflict. This is from Simon Smart, director of the Centre of Public Christianity. Religion has been implicated in all sorts of conflict and violence throughout human history. There is blood on the hands of the faithful, and no avoiding the fact that in the service of the wrong people, religion can be a force of great harm. That includes Christianity. If we consider the sins of the Christian past, critics have plenty to work with. Witch hunts, the Crusades, Christian support of slavery. I mean, already really bad, isn't it? Like, witch hunts, that was out of order. The Crusades were terrible, and supporting slavery, I mean, come on guys, these are not minor crimes. But the picture is much more complex than is often implied. Take the Inquisition. It was quite good fun. Dinner party guests are likely to nod in agreement when someone mentions the millions killed at the hands of the church, but historians now suggest around 5,000 to 6,000 over a 350-year period. It wasn't that bad. Nobody suspects the Spanish Inquisition.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
That's less than 8 in a year. I like that. Actually, what this guy's doing is it's not that bad. I mean, it is bad. It's bad. It was really bad. 1 a year is terrible, but the reality appears a long way from what we're often served up. Likewise, the idea that most of the wars in history have been caused by religion is demonstrably false. The vast majority of wars have been conducted in the pursuit of profits or power. Totally, that is true. Or waged for territory or tribal supremacy, even if religion has been caught up in those pursuits. So there's a very real sense in which religion can moderate those forces. David Hart notes that religious convictions often provide the sole compelling reason for refusing to kill or seeking peace. The truth is that religion and irreligion are cultural variables, but killing is a human constant. That's a very good point. And we've pointed out elsewhere in our content that Bishop Mari Emanuel, after he was violently stabbed, firstly, he wants that stuff to stay online, curiously, unlike the centralist government, said, forgive the perpetrator, forgive the perpetrator. Whereas we're well aware that whether it's wars in Europe or the Middle East, people are like, no, well, we've got to have our revenge. In a sense, religion gives us a pathway out of materialism and violence, even if that's a petty spat between individuals or a massive global war in which millions of people could potentially die. Of course, millions were killed at the hands of Mao, Stalin and Pol Pot, and continue to be killed right now. It's happening all the time. You don't need to go to the greats. You don't need to go to like the Beatles of dictatorships. All you need to do is look at like Tony Blair, George Bush, Obama, your man now, Biden. It's happening now. It's not like, oh, well, I suppose Hitler wasn't really... No, it's happening all the time now. To say their murderous totalitarianism had nothing to do with their their atheism is to completely misunderstand them and the ideologies on which their actions rested. Yale theologian Miroslav Volf argues that as far as Christianity goes, it will only be violent if it's stripped of its content, thinned out and infused with a different set of values. The story of Jesus gives absolutely no warrant for violence. Any believer behaving that way is disobeying the one they claim to be following. In fact, he couldn't have been more clear, could he, on walk the extra mile if someone tries to control you, turn the other cheek if someone hits you, and he himself, when subjected to the violence of the passion, behaved with total and utter acceptance and compliance, precisely because the flagellation and ultimate mortification of the flesh leads to the transcendence. Indeed, surrendering and non-violence is a Christian idea. I don't know enough to know whether it's a fundamentally Muslim idea or fundamentally Buddhist idea, figure that it is, or Hindu. But in Christianity, we know that from the figure of Christ, not the institutions that were subsequently set up to align with power, and I think it's probably significant that a Roman emperor went, actually, let's use this Christianity now. It was fused pretty early in its history, a couple of 100 years in, 300 years in, with an empire, with a system of power, and it's pretty difficult not to imagine that that had an impact on some of the theology. The answer, Wolf argues, to violence perpetuated in the name of the cross is not less Christianity, but more Christianity that is not depleted of its meaning, but full of its original moral content, which is at heart non-violent and a force for good. When Martin Luther King Jr. confronted racism in the white church in the South, he called on those churches not to become more secular, but more Christian. King knew that the answer to racism and violence was not less Christianity, but a deeper and truer Christianity. King gained his inspiration from the one who said that those who follow him must turn the other cheek, love their enemies, and pray for those who persecuted them. His leadership of the civil rights struggle remains a fine example of love triumphing over hate, of costly and courageous resistance of evil, and of religiously inspired social action that made the kind of difference that everyone can appreciate. Indeed, the phrase, the world doesn't need more people to believe in God, but just the ones that do to start acting like it, seems pretty resonant here. What we're living in is a morally plastic universe now, where people continually mutate and reconstitute their values based on an agenda. Now, what I believe we require is a set of absolutely reliable truths. For example, we all know there is such a thing as good and evil. We are all aware that we should be living lives of service and kindness. And the reason I suppose that Christianity has become so appealing, to me at least, is it's like the figure of Christ is identified strongly with suffering. The idea that God took human form and undertook this suffering has a power in it that is beyond rational. In revisiting the scripture, what I'm discovering in there are accounts that seem increasingly likely to be true, rather than what I would have thought 5-10 years ago. Oh, this is just an amalgam of myths. He's a kind of composite figure, a bit Osiris, a little bit Dionysus, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Now I see a kind of odd fusion between a biographical and material truth and absolute divinity. When people recognize that we are at a point of crisis, they seem to stop short of acknowledging that what's required is a spiritual charge, that there needs to be a new importation, a new import. You cannot change the conditions that we are in just by going, well, what if we did this and moved this over here? The conditions are set. The paradigm is set. Unless we introduce something new or allow something always present to flourish, we're not going to change the world. But my faith and belief isn't just about utility and practicality, although it is, to a degree, a practical decision that I am making personally, is because I'm sensing the temporal nature of all this, how easily it can all pass away, how in suffering you need to reach somewhere. The idea that this world is all there is, the idea that these values are all that we can reach towards, has become unacceptable. It's not like the fingers crossed, wish fulfillment, believe in Jesus so that there's life in the hereafter. No, it's more profound than that. What I am encountering is a sense that it's not only a problem the world is the way it is because of the hypocrisy, the corruption, the lies, the treachery, the violence, the manipulation, the censorship, the surveillance, the centralization of power, the manipulation of consciousness, the presenting of a reality that isn't true. It's not just that it is plainly bad, but that it's bad instead of something else. And that we've been promised something else, and that we've been told a change is coming. And I'm starting to feel it. Something is happening that's beyond categorization. In the same way that you wouldn't try to make rational sense of a Buddhist koan, of like, what's the sound of one hand clapping, although Bart Simpson did answer that one.
Piece of cake.
The idea that a pact was made between God and man, that we could have our sins atoned for through the sacrifice of God's self, that things are somehow separate and together, that there is something that is beyond logic, beyond cosmology, beyond reason, and somehow superior to it. not inferior to it. The age of reason may be at an end. The age of materialism may be coming to an end. Many great civilizations and the resources of the earth itself appear to be expiring. But the possibility of rebirth, of resurrection, of being born again is very, very real. So I think it's no surprise at all that people are turning to not, I would say, empty old ideas, but arcane, ever vibrant, ever new, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be. Ideas that are atemporal, aspatial, divine, and actually, let's, bring this down a gear or two, based on things like love and kindness and community, is exactly what we need to be bringing to the forefront of our mind. So, I imagine that's why Candace Owens is converted to Catholicism, though she doesn't need me to articulate for her. Why Tammy Peterson has converted to Catholicism. Certainly what I can tell you, that's why I am getting baptized at the weekend, and that's presumably why so many people are turning away from materialism and turning towards spirituality, and in particular, in my case at least, Christianity. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments in the chat? Click the link in the description. Join us, become a member of our community to get access to all of that other stuff. But more important than that, if you can, please stay free.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.